Welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show. Here's your host, Jim Harris.
Welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show. We have a great episode for you today. Our first guest is Alan Walden. Alan and his brother Phil founded Capricorn Records, and Alan has been involved with some of the great acts in music history. Sam and Dave, Otis Redding, Lynyrd Skynyrd, the Outlaws, Boz Scaggs, the list just goes on and on. His fingerprints are all over the music of the golden era of rock and roll, and Alan is going to be sharing some incredible rock stories with us today. We also have Neil Carswell, who was the front man and guitar player for the band Copperhead that we, a few episodes ago, recommended as a hidden gem. Alan, welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show, and if you don't mind, I want to ask you to jump right in with one of my favorites amongst all your great stories, and that is the one about how you signed Boz Scaggs.
Right.
How did you happen to come across Boz Scaggs?
Well, this is kind of a unique story. We received a call from Diane Williamson saying that this writer for Rolling Stone wanted to come in and interview us and cover a press story on the Walden brothers and Capricorn and the whole Southern rock movement. And this guy came to Macon, and I spent 3 days and nights whining and dining him to the max. We were going to 7 and 8 in the morning party times, you know. Anyway, this guy and I really hit it off really good. I mean, I loved his personality. I loved it. We had the same thoughts in so many different ways. Well, he comes into the office. We've been partying heavy. I mean, we drank heavy in those days. And he comes into the office and says, Alan, I need to tell you something. And I go, what is it, boss? What's happening? He says, I'm not really a writer for Rolling Stone magazine.
No kidding.
And he had come in under the impression that he was a writer for Rolling Stone magazine. Man, I was visualizing being on the front of Rolling Stone.
The cover of the Rolling Stone, as the song says.
I'm going to blow this guy away, man. I mean, he's digging me and I'm digging him. And we really, and I go, man, I mean, my whole head had to drop. I mean, I was just like, holy shit, I've wasted 3 days and nights here entertaining this guy, and he's another guitar player. We got Dwayne Allman, we got Johnny Jenkins, we got Pete Carr, we got a lot of Dickie Betts, you know. I mean, and how many great guitars do we have around here, you know? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's neat. And he says, Alan, I've had 2 or 3 platinum records. And I go, you have? Let me listen to what you have to say. And turns out that he came in as a writer for Rolling Stone so he could catch us and get the inside story on the management company before he made a deal with the manager. And so I ended up signing him to a management contract.
Was he with Steve Miller before he was solo?
Yeah, he sure was.
Was the call really from Jan Winter, or was the call a setup too?
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember. You talk about, did he make the call to
right?
I'm sure he did, because we didn't know anybody else there at that time.
What a story, though.
Oh, listen, it was great. He came in and like I said, he said, you know, we need to have the platinum records. I'm going, oh, yeah. But I'm not for you. He said, well, I was with Steve Miller, and he told me this history, you know, and I'm going, wow. This guy really does have a career. And I had never heard of him. I mean, I had no idea who Boz Scaggs was.
Did you sign him to be his manager, or did you sign him to the label, or both?
Manager.
Well, obviously, you made the right call. He's an incredible artist.
Oh, yeah. Listen, Boz was the Sinatra of rock and roll. This guy was so soulful and so tasteful, you know. His New Year's Eve parties, where he came out with his rock and roll band, and when the show had been like 30, 40 minutes into the show, all of a sudden, wham, and the curtains would open up, and there was like a 20-something piece orchestra behind him, you know.
Oh, wow.
And they did that every New Year's Eve until he had a horrible incident with his son OD'd backstage at one of those events. And that was the last time he did them, I think.
Oh, what a tragedy.
But, Boz, that record, Lowdown, just think, how many times have you heard Lowdown?
I've seen him live a few times, and honestly, there's so many artists, and I'm sure you've witnessed this, that they lose so much from the studio to the stage. They don't bring it off on stage, and Boz was not that. He was incredible live.
Boz is the only guy I know that get a standing ovation on his entrance. As he enters the stage, he gets a standing ovation.
And he deserves it.
And I went to see him a couple times. And primarily, there was one day up here in a little area called Peachtree. I went up to see him, and I got to go backstage, shake hands with him, and say hi before he went out on stage. Well, man, when Boz got out there on stage, after he'd done Low Down a couple other songs, he stopped and started talking about me.
That had to make you feel like $1 million.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm sitting there going, and he used to talk about, this guy was a friend. I moved him into my log cabin out by the Otis Redding Ranch.
Really?
He lived out there for like 5 months while he got settled in Macon. He came into Macon, and really he didn't find the direction he wanted. Phil was so busy with the Allman Brothers that he didn't have the time that Boz needed in his career,
Gotcha.
But we were all friends. That was the main thing, is that we still remain friends, even though the deal didn't happen. Boz just one special guy. There was another situation where my nephew G. Scott was manager of the Ryman in Nashville, and he saw Boz and told him who he was. And when Boz came out on stage that night, he did about a 15-minute story about Alan Walden again.
Wow.
It just honored me and made me feel wonderful that I was glad and made the friendship,
Well, that's awesome.
And he and I both loved fish. Well, we could both fish, and we didn't waste those fish. We cleaned them and cooked them that night.
Nothing wrong with a good fish dinner, I can promise you that.
Oh, and listen, these were the young catfish out of Otis's pond. And we were catching like 17, 18 catfish a night and stock us up and fish for a while,
Man, I love some good catfish.
And Boz and I also love that good Budweiser beer. He kind of went with the catfish.
Nothing wrong with a little beer every once in a while, too.
Yeah. Hey, unless you get like me and start drinking 28 a day. When I did that, I thought, my God, I finally have got to get this back in hand,
Alan, there's an old saying that if I'd known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. So I think about that fairly often.
Well, I got to tell you something. You're saying a word that I feel every day I wake up.
Here's the thing to keep in mind. You have to drink, because later in life, when you start telling your stories, no good story ever starts with, well, we were having a salad.
Right. That's right. That's a great line. I like that.
Most Southern rock fans will know the story of how Steve Gaines came to replace Ed King in Lynyrd Skynyrd. His connection to the band was through his sister, Cassie, who was one of Skynyrd's backup singers known as the Honkettes. Tragically, both Steve and Cassie perished in the 1977 plane crash. Prior to Gaines joining the band, however, there were several auditions, some of them very high profile. One of them was Leslie West from the band Mountain, from the great song Mississippi Queen. West actually expressed an interest in joining the band, but wanted the billing changed to Lynyrd Skynyrd featuring Leslie West. The band vetoed that idea, and the rest is history. Let's jump ahead a little bit. Now, you were auditioning acts in Jacksonville. You had been doing it around the South, and you had, I think, according to your book, I think it's 15 acts or so, and one of them happened to be number 13, and that was the Lynyrd Skynyrd band.
That's right. They were the last band that played, and this was the first audition that I did once I opened my new company. And I say a friend of mine down in Jacksonville, a young guy from Jacksonville named Pat Armstrong. Came to work with me for a year or so. But anyway, he set up all these auditions in the Jacksonville warehouse. Like I said, I auditioned 13 bands that day. When I heard Freebird, that was it. I said, this band has really got something here. I'm gonna hang on to them. And I went on to audition a total of 187 bands before I sat down and said, hey, fellas, let's go to work. They came in. We were turned down by 9 different record companies. This is after them here. Freebird, Give Me 3 Step, some just fantastic songs. The record companies turned them down, said they sounded too much like the Allman Brothers.
I read that in your book, too, and I don't see that at all.
They don't sound like the Allman Brothers a bit, just because they got screaming guitars and Southern music. People say they sound like them, but they're totally 2 different styles of music.
2 different styles of living, too.
Yeah, I see. And they were the leaders. I mean, don't take a thing in the world away from the Allman Brothers, because they were the ones that got out there and paved the road for the rest of us to be able to have it much easier, I
read, and I think this was in your book, that the same day that you auditioned Skynyrd and all the other bands, that one of those bands had a lead singer that most of us are familiar with, Mickey Thomas.
Yes. Uh-huh.
I saw Mickey last year with his current version of Starship. He's an incredible frontman. He
was in a band called Oregon Zabel, and I took them to Muscle Shoals. They recorded at David Johnson's Sheffield Broadway sound. We did about 8 or 9 tracks from them. And it came down to who is going to be the band that's going to be the big push. Is it going to be Skynyrd, or is it going to be Oregon Zabel? And I put them in the studio in the same week. Oregon Zabel took the day shift, kind of got the starter. Lynyrd Skynyrd did the night shift, and they had no treatment. They were staying in a truck stop with no TVs in it, eating peanut butter sandwiches the whole session. And you were talking about like the 4 or 5 days of recording here. The tougher things were for Skynyrd, the harder they hit it. Ronnie wasn't scared of nothing. I mean, he was. Here's this guy. Ronnie wasn't a big guy. People think how bad he was. He wasn't a big guy, but I'm going to tell you something. When he went to fight, Ronnie would jump up in the air and hit down on you. And when he hit you, buddy, you were going out most of the times. Thank goodness he and I never fought, because I know now I wouldn't have stood a chance. But he had hands fast as Muhammad Ali here.
He didn't just sing the songs. He lived the life, right?
Oh, yeah. See, when I first signed them, we're standing outside of 1019 Walnut Street, and it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We're calling it hit the end for the week. Ronnie's talking with me, and he says, Alan Walden, I'm going to write you a lot of songs. And I said, no, Ronnie, don't write me a lot of songs. Write me one good one. And that good one just happened to be Freebird.
That one's iconic.
Well, see, and the thing about it is, by me being a publisher, I was always aware of songs. And I learned how to structure from Otis Redding. And I had 3 number ones, when you think about it. When a Man Loves a Woman by Percy Sledge was my first one. And then Sitting on the Dock of the Bay was my second one. And then Freebird by Will to Power became my third one. How many people do you know had 3 number 1 records?
Counting you, 1.
Yeah. Well, I tell you,
I know quite a few that have gotten close, but not number 1.
I had a lot of number 2s and 3s and 10s and 8s. As long as they made the top 10, I was very happy.
When Skynyrd hooked up with Al Kooper, that came from the night at Finocchio's, by how you tell some of the stories in your book, it was very evident that you and Kooper weren't necessarily synchronized in your thoughts. How did that work?
Well, Kooper wanted to control everything about the Skynyrd band. He wanted to have the recording and have a say-so in the management and everything else. He was trying to lock the band down totally. he didn't realize that I already had like 3 years into this band. He was going to be the northern Jewish guy that comes down south and restructures the whole southern. He didn't realize that, hell, I had more hits than he did. He was difficult to work with for me. He was constantly wanting to try things that I didn't think fit the band. I wanted them to stay the tough guys. Hey, when we would go towards the stage, I've said this before in an interview, I felt like a gladiator going into the arena. We were out to kill the following act. I mean, we want to be the show stoppers. And we took most of the shows that we played on. There were like maybe 3 people that were able to shove that crap right back down our throat. The Eagles being one. I wanted to burn the Eagles up so bad because everybody cramming the Eagles down my throat. And I wanted Skynyrd to tear them up. Skynyrd went out there and boogied and boogied and boogied and had that crowd just roaring away. And I thought, now Irving is off. You should take that. And the Eagles came charging out there with little cut-off shorts on, took those harmonies, picked it up right where we left it off, and took it over the mountain.
That's a great story. Do you remember where that was?
Tampa, Florida.
Tampa, Florida.
Outdoor date, big day. It was a big day in Tampa. I think probably the big arena, big crowd. Ronnie Van Zant was standing on the edge of the stage with a white handkerchief waving it at him. Well, it was a lot of fun, you know. I tell you, there was no greater feeling than to hear 100,000 people screaming at you.
I bet. In our feature covers, we tell you about a remake of a rock classic that we think is worth a listen. And this week, we've got a great one for you. In 1998, the Georgia band Jackal released an album, Choice Cuts. Jackal, as you'll recall, was probably the first band ever to feature a chainsaw in their studio recordings and in their stage show. Great frontman Jesse James Dupree, they're still touring today, and on this album, there's a remake of the Grand Funk classic, We're an American Band. It's available on all streaming platforms, including iTunes, so we recommend you give it a listen. All right, let's go back to Alan Walden. I read the story in your book. You don't have to necessarily tell it again unless you want to. I read the part about where you recruited Leon back into the band during a show and then consequently created the 3-guitar attack, if you will, with Ed King and Alan and Gary.
Well, we're in a club called the Headrest in Atlanta, Georgia, and Leon had left Skynyrd to go play with a group called King James Version, which was really a religious group. And they never had any real success. But like I said, we were at that Headrest nightclub in Atlanta, Georgia, and I found out that Leon was in the building. So I asked Ronnie, I said, you know, why don't you invite Leon to come up and play it, let him jam on a song? And Ronnie says, oh, no, man, I'm going to tell you something. The guy quit me, that's the end of it for he and I. He didn't want to do it. I said, come on, man, let's give it one try and see what happens, you know? So he went along with it, and Leon got up and played on Freebird. Well, after he played on Freebird, that was kind of like the end of our set. We're walking back to the dressing room, and I said, Ed King brought it up. He said, Ronnie, I have to tell you, he said, I don't think I will ever be able to play Freebird on bass the way he plays it. And he was telling the truth. So anyway, I said something to Ronnie about it. He said, oh, damn it, quit me once. I said, the end of it, I don't want to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, just think about it, Ronnie. Think about it for a few days before you make a decision. And so a couple of days later, I got a phone call, and I left on my message machine and said, we are now a 7-member band. And I was thrilled, you know.
You were not advocating replacing Ed with Leon. You were advocating moving Ed to guitar and letting Leon take back over bass duties.
Well, when they asked us, you know, so what we're going to do with Ed King, I said, didn't you say he played guitar? They said, yeah. And I said, let's put him on guitar. He said, man, that'll be 3 guitarists. So they'll be stepping all over each other. And I said, Ronnie, have you tried it? Let's try it. And we did, and we became the 3-guitar sound. We were probably one of the best people in the world for promoting the 3-guitar sound.
Well, it sort of took hold because, there were quite a few bands that followed that did the same thing.
Well, I mean, Skynyrd was so copied, period. I mean, their music, I don't know of another band ever in history that rehearsed as much as Lynyrd Skynyrd. These guys rehearsed. They went to what they call the Hell House, and we used to call it Hidden Hills before they changed it to Hell House. Go to that rehearsal room every day like clockwork, like clocking in at a department store or whatever. And they had to deal with the sheriff where they would shut off at 6 o'clock so it wouldn't disturb the neighborhood. We had a huge range on our PA. I mean, Lynyrd Skynyrd was one of the loudest bands in the world. And I'm still deaf. He's with them, I mean, it's definitely hearing age time. For me, it's 79 years old here.
This week's Hidden Gem is a little-known album from a well-known star. In between his time with Montrose and Van Halen, Sammy Hagar built quite the impressive solo career. In 1978, he released a live solo album, All Night Long. On that album was a live version of the song he wrote and recorded with Montrose, Bad Motor Scooter, a song he wrote that would later become a hit for Rick Springfield, I've Done Everything for You, and his remake of a Donovan song, Young Girl Blues. It's a great album. It's absolutely worth a listen, and it's available on iTunes. All right, let's get back with Alan, and we're going to talk about the Florida Guitar Army, the Outlaws, another one of his great bands.
Well, and I got to tell you something, the Outlaws ain't no slouch either. Well, I got to tell you, Huey Thomason did not have to take backseat to anybody. My man, I saw him walk out on a dead audience and wake up 30,000 people with one solo.
There was so much talent in that time frame in Southern rock.
Bear in mind, it was Ronnie Van Zant that called me and told me that I need to sign the Outlaws.
And what a great stroke of luck that was that he did that and that you did that, because, God, if we'd never heard the live version of Green Grass and High Tides, what would life be? We got Clive Davis when I had already been through the Skynyrd route, and had proved myself as a manager that was capable of doing things. Clive had been told about the Outlaws by an AR guy named Bob Fight. They said, Clive wants you to send him some tapes. I said, no, I want Clive to come see my band. I don't want to do the tape route. I want to do live performance. I got him to fly to Columbus, Georgia. He had never changed airplanes in the Atlanta airport before. And he got onto a Southern or one of the smaller airlines and flew to Columbus, Georgia. We were on the show with Skynyrd that particular night, and we were at the City Auditorium, which was a nice-sized place. So I took him and led him in and put him up on the soundboard with the sound technician so he would hear exactly what the mix was, And I walked on around backstage and got the guys all psyched up and everything, and they came out and they were killing. Well, I eased around in the crowd and came up behind Clive where he couldn't see me, but I saw his foot. And I said, I got you. Because I caught that foot. I went on backstage, sat down on a trash can now. That became my desk. I sat on a trash can and talked to Clive Davis about signing a record deal with Eric Records. We talked, we agreed on things there at the show. And I said, well, come on to the hotel and we'll carry it on from there. And he came over to the hotel and we stayed up for wee hours of the morning talking music. And I ended up having a great respect for Clive Davis. Man, he's one of the smartest record men there was,
And,
What a guy. I had no idea that that's how the Outlaws got signed. That was incredible.
And let me tell you one other good part about it. See, they were on the show with Skynyrd. Ronnie Van Zant got a hold to Clive Davis and told him, said, "You are going to fuck up if you don't sign this band." That was coming from Van Zant. At that point, Van Zant had already begun to show his wings. That also helped making the deal. And see, I didn't ask for big money record deal. I asked for a deal where I knew my records would get promoted. I wanted where my record sales were big, you know. And that was where it all happened, right there in Columbus, Georgia, sitting on the trash can.
We have Neil Carswell from the awesome rock band Copperhead with us. Neil, welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show.
Yes.
A couple of episodes back, we had your album as a hidden gem, and the hidden gem is obviously something we recommend to our listeners that they look up and check out because we think they'll really like it, and it's a great album. What a fortunate set of circumstances to get connected with you and get to hear a little more of the Copperhead story, so thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
How did Copperhead end up with a record deal with Mercury Records?
Well, we had an attorney, Fred Davis, Clive Davis' son, who set us up with showcases. And we played like 7 or 8, 9 showcases straight. They had sent us to New York, flew us up there, and we rented equipment to showcase for different record labels. In the end, we ended up going with a guy named Alec Peters, who was our A&R rep at Mercury Records. So he ended up signing the band along with Bob Scaggs and Ed Eckstein, Billy Eckstein's son.
How long after you guys got signed were you in the studio recording?
It wasn't long at all.
Did you all record your album in Atlanta?
No, in Memphis. Finished it in Atlanta.
The album comes out, and we'll back up a little bit and say that they actually really put some serious horsepower into this album because you had legendary producer Tom Dowd and you had Rodney Mills as a co-producer and an engineer. I mean, that's quite the rock and roll resume there.
Yes.
How did it work with those two guys?
It worked great. That was the first time they had been together was us since Street Survivors with Skynyrd.
Yeah, when they had a little bit of a falling out over the Criteria Studios situation.
Yeah.
You guys got the benefit of having that much talent in the studio with you. So your album comes out, then tell us what happened. You guys went on tour, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And who were you touring with, Neil?
Well, we toured with the Kentucky Headhunters, 38 Special, mainly, as supporting them.
How did those gigs go?
Oh, they were great.
Did you feel like that you were well received by the crowds when you were playing in front of these bigger audiences?
Yeah.
So then you guys had an opportunity to have a song in a major motion picture soundtrack, Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. How did that come about?
Yes. Someone at Polygram Records, I can't remember her name, but she had got us that movie score. And we recorded the song, and they liked it, so they decided to put it in the movie.
Now, you also had some exposure on MTV, correct?
Yes.
How did that go for the band?
That went pretty good. We done a video and all that, you know.
Now, was the video for Long Way From Home?
No, it was for Whiskey.
Whiskey, okay. Those are, by the way, for our listeners, those are two great songs from this album. So you guys toured around for a couple of years. You ended up on MTV. You ended up in a motion picture soundtrack of a major film. And then the band broke up and there was never a second album. What happened?
We just ended up going our differences, you know. There's a second album called Live and Lost that I put out, which was going to be part of our second album, and some live tracks, and then some lost tracks that were never put out that I put together, which can be purchased on CD Baby on downloads. That's Live and Lost.
That was in the 2000s, right?
Yeah.
What's happened with your musical life since Copperhead?
Well, I went on solo on my own and got 3 records that I've got one in Texas now I'm finishing. ZZ Top's Old Compound.
Wow.
When I was working with Bill Hamd, he passed away. Their manager. And I'm working with his nephew, Dave Dickinson. And I've got to get back to Texas and finish up this record, which is called Burn It Down.
When do you think the release date will be for that?
I don't know. Hopefully within the next 6 months or so.
Will you do me a favor and keep us posted so we can let our listeners know when they'll be able to get it?
Yeah.
Now, you also have one of your Copperhead members that I believe is now playing with Artemis Pyle, correct?
Yeah, Brad Dirt.
Neil, I can't thank you enough for being with us today and adding a chapter to our Hidden Gems. When we put something in Hidden Gems, it's an album that we think that our folks will really, really like. And I would say that the Copperhead album definitely fits that definition. We thank you so much for the great music, and thank you for taking the time and catching us up on the backstory on Copperhead. I want to thank our incredible guests, Alan Walden and Neil Carswell, for being with us on the Southern Voice Rock Show. In the show notes, you'll find a link to Neil's music and to purchase Alan's book, Southern Man. It is a great read. I recommend it highly. Public service message. Lots of fake Facebook profiles are popping up that seem to belong to rock stars, but don't. And those profiles are reaching out to people asking for money. It happened this week alone to Michael Cartellone from Lynyrd Skynyrd and Bobby Golden from Stillwater. So be careful who you follow, and definitely be careful about who you send money to. And if you have followed any of these profiles, please report them to Facebook so they will be aware that they are fraudulent. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Southern Voice Rock Show. We'll have a new episode for you next week. So until then, just keep rocking.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening.